Welcome back to the Open Peace Podcast, everybody. I'm Jared, and this beard is not the result of piety. This is pure laziness. And today we are joined by Joseph from the Israel Advocacy Movement. I can't speak. We also got Amir, Aboud, and Kane. This should be a very interesting episode for everybody. Joseph, just I guess start us off. You want to explain a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I'm loving the amount of facial hair on this, whether it's laziness, piety, or hipsterness. I feel at home. So I run an organization called the Israel Advocacy Movement over in the UK, and we do what it says on the tin. We promote Israel. But I think where we differ from other organizations is the people we're reaching out to with our media. One of our biggest viewers, I was just mentioning a country before we jumped onto the live stream or went public, is Bangladesh. We have big followers in Bangladesh. We have followings in Pakistan. We have followings in Saudi Arabia. I mean, the Gulf states, we get a lot of viewers looking at the content we're producing, because I think the approach we take is that we're going to communities that are maybe hostile to Israel, that are maybe hostile to Jews. So we will reach out to white supremacists, we'll reach out to Islamists, and we'll speak to ordinary, everyday Muslims and ordinary, everyday Brits. But I think a lot of the advocacy that gets done within the wider world is, when it comes to promoting Israel, is preaching to the choir. And so I guess what we're looking to do is speak to the people that nobody's listening to, and the people that pose the greatest threat to the Jewish community and the greatest threat to Israel outside of Israel. And so, yeah, in a summary, that's me. That's the organization I run. Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, what's the benefit of doing that, you think, speaking to the more extreme types? Why would you speak to them as opposed to the people who are open to having a dialogue with you?
It depends what your philosophy is, what you're looking to do. And so the philosophy of the Israel Advocacy Movement is to strengthen Israel and to defend the Jewish people. And interfaith typically involves parties that are already close, like already see the value in each other. So as an example, if you go to an interfaith event in the UK, what tends to happen is you'll get a Muslim, a Christian, and a Jew. And they all will tell you how beautiful their respective faiths are, how we all believe in the same God, how we all, certainly with the Muslims and the Jews, how we have similar dietary laws. And isn't it amazing? We're just cousins, and it's beautiful. But then nothing happens, and nobody's speaking to the fundamentalist. The imam who comes to the interfaith event isn't a threat to the Jewish people. I've spoken to convicted terrorists. I've spoken to guys that are connected to the London Bridge terror cell. And in each of those exchanges, you're speaking to somebody who harbors ill will towards the Jew. So if you can change one of them, or if it's on video, if you can change the minds of those that are watching him, then you have the potential to do good. And then when it comes to promoting Israel, most Hasbara is preaching to the choir. It's telling Jews who are already pro-Israel how amazing Israel is, or telling Christians who are already pro-Israel how amazing Israel is. And there's a need for that. But they're not the people who need their minds changing. Is that you're preaching to the choir. And so for the Israel Advocacy Movement and for myself, it's about reaching the people that others aren't.
Okay. Very nice, very nice. And one of the things that I think your videos, that they have a great impact on the fundamentalist, is that you're kind of showing a different side to what they're hearing in the echo chambers and what they see in the media. I just wanted to know, what is the kind of response that you do get from some of the more fundamentalists that have viewed your content?
So what I'll do, I won't share my screen, but I'll just pull up a quote. So I mentioned the chap who was connected to the London Bridge terror cell. So let me just pull up, because I don't want to get his name wrong. Give me 2 seconds.
All right.
So his English name I remember is Ricardo McFarlane. There we go. So there's a few years ago, and I'll give you the history of the gentleman in question. A few years ago, I don't know if it made the news outside of the UK, but it certainly made British news. There were Sharia Patrols set up outside the East London Mosque. What happened was some Islamists would approach British people who were dressed inappropriately or drinking alcohol near the mosque and threaten them with violence, telling them this was a Muslim area, you need to stop drinking, you need to dress more sniyut. And so he was the organizer of the Sharia Patrols. He then he was a student of a Muslim called Anjem Chowdhury, who is probably responsible for radicalizing more Muslims in the UK than any other imam.
Definitely.
Isn't he out on patrol?
I believe he is, yeah. Although I've got a great selfie of me with him. He was giving a talk against democracy at Regent's Park Mosque, and I was wearing a velvet kappa, the kippah at the time, and a white shirt. And I approached him and I said, "Anjem, can I have a selfie with you, mate?" And he looked at me and he said, "Certainly, brother." And so I posed next to him. He posed next to me. He raised his finger, which is it's either one God, one religion, one thing, la ilaha illallah. And he literally said, he went, la ilaha illallah, raised his finger. And I looked at him and I said, Musa Rasulallah. Moses is his messenger. And his jaw dropped to the floor as he realized he wasn't pressing with a Muslim, he was pressing with a Jew. All his jihadi mates fell about laughing. The police fell about laughing. It was so Anjem Chowdhury, one of his students is this guy, the guy Ricardo McFarlane, and he was in a documentary by Channel 4 called "The Jihadis Next Door," and in that was one of the terrorists from the London Bridge terror attack a few years ago. And so this guy is he's a convicted Islamist. He's got very, very, very dangerous connections. He's whipped out the ISIS flag, or certainly the Black Standard, at protests in London. And I've debated him many, many times. And I've spoken to him many times. And I'm going to read a comment I found. There's another, and I don't know how familiar you guys are with Dawah, but Dawah is like Islamic outreach, where you try to convert people to Islam. You bring them the message of Islam in the hope that they will accept it and become Muslim. And so one of the most famous Dawah callers in the UK, I actually don't have any issues with him, Mohammed Hijab. He's someone I've debated many times. And Mohammed posted a video of me and him in a debate. And underneath, I'll read a comment from, it's named Abdul Hakim, which is Ricardo McFarlane's Muslim name. Joseph has more al-wala wal-bara than the Muslims. I never thought I'd say this, but I really respect Joseph's honesty. How can we expect and wish him to give a different answer? He loves his people, and so he should. And so the point of reading that quote is, here is someone who is very, very much on the extreme spectrum. And here he is leaving comments of how he respects me. And why does he respect me? Because I'm not an apologetic Jew. I'm not an apologetic Zionist. I support Israel, but I oppose all these things. I support Judaism, but I dislike all these aspects of the faith. And I think by reaching out to people like Abdul Hakim, Ricardo McFarlane, you have the potential to change his mind. Now, I don't know if he's still an anti-Semite. Hopefully he isn't. I don't know if he's someone who would go out and do something horrendous. Hopefully he isn't. But the very fact he's in those circles, and I've been able to engage him on a personal level and connect with him on a personal level to the extent that he's leaving comments on other Muslims about how he respects me, even though I'm a Zionist and a Jew, I think that's a positive. And then the other aspect to it is a lot of these conversations aren't aimed at the individual. So you'll be debating an extremist, a Nazi. A Nazi is much easier because most people don't like Nazi. I mean,
it's completely accepted to bash their ideas.
Sorry, say that again?
I said it's completely accepted to bash their ideas.
Yeah, and I think one of the key differences between a Nazi, at least in my experience, and an Islamist is Islamists still access the core Islamic texts, and most religions are basically entire libraries on how to be a good people. Every book is just how can you be a better person. And even when you're on the extreme spectrum, you still access those texts. It's just you also interpret other texts in more extreme ways. And so, in my experience, even the most extreme Muslims, Islamists, I don't like the term Muslim, but even the most extreme Islamists can be reasoned with because they are, in essence, trying to lead a good life, even if they go way off the derrick, way off the path.
They can be good Samaritans.
They don't. The Nazis is just pure hate in my experience. And I'm talking full on National Socialist Nazis like Mark Collett and the likes. And so with these people, when you're debating them, I'm not going to change Mark Collett's ideas about Jews. What you can do is change his audience. So you can challenge his views. And when you're speaking to the individual, you're speaking through him and you're actually addressing his audience. And so I think there are two different tactics, is talking on an individual level and talking to their viewers, to the collective.
Right.
Yeah. No, I can get that.
So what kind of challenges, by the way, are you kind of facing to meet your kind of goal, you can say?
The challenge I'm facing is a really mundane challenge. The biggest challenge I, as a Zionist, pro-Jewish, pro-Israel Jew face is big tech's algorithms and big tech censorship. We produce videos that used to reach millions of people and we're getting censored because it's not advertiser friendly. But in terms of what's my next biggest challenge is
bring the word out there.
I think the biggest challenge or the biggest threat that we potentially face in the UK and I think in the West in general is a rising far right. We've had a very rough ride with the far left in the UK, and there's the ongoing Islamist threat. But what we're now facing is a rise in the right. And as Western society polarizes into this left versus right culture war type environment, we get used as political pawns by both sides, and we get booted around by both sides. And the rise in far right, I believe, is a huge threat to the Jews outside of Israel.
Yeah. I mean, that's like. Yeah, that's like the same thing I've been complaining about for years, like to my American friends, like both left and right in America. Like Jews are nothing more than like a trading card to them. We're not people in their eyes. We're a thing to be bargained over, an idea to be debated. We're not actual people. And like that in of itself proves the need why we need our own country.
Completely agree. I completely agree. And it's unfortunate. So a great example is Donald Trump. Donald Trump did good things for the Jewish people, and he was clearly very pro-Israel. But if you don't like Donald Trump and you're really opposed to his politics, then you come to see Israel as being associated with Trump. On the inverse of that, in the UK, we have Corbyn. Now, if you looked at the Labour conference like Corbyn's last Labour conference in Brighton, it was a sea of Palestinian flags. Yeah. And you have this weird charge that the Israeli lobby controls politics. Like, I challenge you to find any mainstream political party in the world where their national conference has not one flag of the host nation and thousands, at least hundreds, of Palestinian flags. And it was the other way around in the UK. So if you were on the left, you were pro-Palestinian. Therefore, if you were right, we suddenly get a load of supporters on the right that are down pro-Israel. So if you go to a Tommy Robinson, who is typically seen as being more on the right than on the left, march in the UK. So Tommy Robinson, for those that aren't familiar, is a populist figure in, Islamophobia, anti-Muslim.
Isn't he the EDL guy?
Yeah, he was and he's a very polarizing figure, but most would associate him with being the right. And so if you go to a far right protest now, you'll see Israeli flags. And not only will you see Israeli flags, you'll see LGBT rainbow flags. And so you have this weird dynamic that why are they there? Because they're opposed to Israel. And so what tends to happen is the Jews fall into this trap where either the right will champion us or attack us. So Nazis versus Tommy Robinson types. And the left is then the inverse of that, is either pro-Palestinian or they'll champion us. But either side were used as a political pawn to point score against the opposition.
That's right, yeah. And I was going to ask, like, because I've seen Tommy Robinson wearing badges saying I'm a Zionist and things like that. And he didn't even, when he was challenged on it, he didn't really know what to say to explain why he was wearing it. He literally just said, because I know that it annoys people. So how much do you interact with Tommy Robinson, and how much do you think that he damages or helps what you're trying to do? Or people like that?
So he both damages and helps. It's the same with Trump. Trump both damages and helps the cause. And so when somebody who has a lot of supporters says good things about your host nation, or Israel, that's a positive. But it's also polarizing, and there's very negative connotations to that. I'll give you an actual real story. So Tommy Robinson's cousin, who was the second in command of the EDL, is a guy called Kev Carroll. And they were having a protest outside the Old Bailey. And I went to observe, and Kev saw me with a kippah, looking very Jewish. And he came up to me and said, "Oh, mate, you're Jewish. Can I shake your hand?" And I said, "I'd rather not, because of what you stand for when it comes to Islam. I'd rather not shake your hand if that's all right." And he looked at me and said, "Well, why don't you just F off back to Israel then?" And my best friend wanted to shake my hand to instantly go back home, get out of Europe.
18 point.
So it's the same as America, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't know America well enough, but I do know that a lot of the support we get from the far right is because it's convenient to them. We can be tokenized, but some of it is genuine as well. I don't want to say that everyone on the right who supports Israel is not coming from me. I genuinely believe Tommy Robinson has positive associations with Israel. I don't doubt that. He goes there, he supports Israel. Whether it's good for the cause or bad for the cause is a different conversation. But I don't doubt that's genuine. But how thoroughly he's thought about the subject, that I don't know. How familiar he is with Israel and what he is saying when he says, is he supporting the liberal democracy it is, where you have 2 million Arabs who have the same voting rights and political representation as Jews, or is he attracted to an Israel that isn't? I don't know. And I don't want to second guess it, because I don't know the man. All I know that his cousin told me to F off back to Israel when I didn't shake his hand. That's the only insight.
It's like, I know you, like you said earlier, like you don't know much about American politics, but like it's pretty much the same kind of like that. I mean, even from the American Christian Zionists, the evangelical wing, which is the only reason why Trump ever gave platitudes to Israel, in my opinion.
I don't know if that's true with Trump. He's got a Jewish children, he's got a Jewish child, Jewish family, Jewish grandchildren. Yeah, I think there is and he's been around the Jewish community for a long time. I think Trump's. Yeah, he's
been around. Just because you've been around Jews and your daughter is married to a Jew doesn't mean you yourself aren't anti-Semitic. Just in the same way, how like a dude will say like, "Oh, my grandkids are black, I can't be racist," as he then proceeds to call them all lazy and shout the N-word.
No, that would definitely be racist, and definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, but like Trump has said some stuff in private.
Are overwhelmingly more pro-Jewish and pro-Israel than the inverse of that. I think you could levy charges against Trump against other communities, but less so with the Jewish community, at least in my personal opinion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like Trump himself has said a lot of like dog whistles that have incited people against the Jews. I mean, like during his presidency in those 4 years, like there was a huge uptick in anti-Jewish violence all over the country, not just like the shootings at synagogues, with the worst one being the Etz Chaim synagogue in Pittsburgh.
Manhattan.
Oh. Yeah, but like there's been, sorry, Kane, I was just going to say, like there's been vandalizing of Jewish property, especially Jewish graveyards, like all over the country have been hit with like MAGA spray painted on gravestones.
I would
with
not
swastikas and all that stuff.
I wouldn't argue for a minute that Trump doesn't have racist followers. He definitely does. He has. Yeah. I mean, originally you had Richard Spencer, doing the Hail Trump. He then did
Hail
U-turn
Trump,
and voted
Hail
for
our
Biden
leader,
in the
Hail
latest
Baker.
election. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm not going to defend the far right.
Yeah.
Debate them.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, got sidetracked on that because like there was something else I wanted to bring up about the Christian Zionist right. There's a channel that I stumbled across where like there's these Christians and I think they live in Israel and they do videos where like they own the libs on Israel. So like again, it's that exact thing we were talking about. We're just a talking point for them. And I was listening to one of the things they said, and they were talking about the elections coming up, and this is something that just really struck me. They called Yair Lapid far left, and they called Netanyahu more center than right these days. And like that just like to me was just instantly like, oh yeah, they don't actually talk to anybody here. They just wave a flag and completely ignore everything around them. Like
It's misunderstanding of what left and right actually mean these days, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because like they're
Sure.
viewing it through American politics, but like that's the point that I'm trying to bring up. They're viewing it through American politics and they're approaching it as a talking point and nothing more. We're a football to be passed around, even by these Christian supporters who are very, very much pro-Israel. We're nothing more than a football to them. So like they can't even take the time to understand like the people around them when they live here.
I also think there's an aspect of we don't have many friends in this world. The Jewish people certainly. We're a very small nation with a disproportionate number of enemies. So we should be grateful of as many of the support, as long as they're within they're not unreasonable and they're not inflicting harm on others. I think we should be as grateful as we can. And one of the things I tend to find is, certainly with the Christian supporters, there are many Jews that really trash talk Christians and say they're just waiting for the rapture and they want us all to basically get killed of it. And my experience is
that's me. I say that all the time.
But my experience is the opposite. Most of them believe that they're blessed because they stand with Israel and they believe that they're receiving blessings and they're doing it out of religious conviction in a positive place. And it's
the Messiah will come.
Lots of horrible people. It's actually nice when people aren't horrible and they're just, even if you disagree with their motivation, you don't share the same faith as them or you share different political beliefs to them, it's still, I think we should do everything that we can to foster positive relations with those that are willing to actually look at us favorably, because there are so many that want to wish harm on us and want to inflict harm on us and do inflict harm on us.
Yeah, but I mean, we still have to be careful because, like as you said, they stand with Israel because they think they're being blessed for doing it. That's an inherently selfish desire. There's no actual concern for our plight.
But I think most people innately are sort of.
Have you ever been into any Palestinian studies, Joseph?
Sorry, go on.
Have you ever been into any a Palestinian area by coincidence or something?
So no, but by intention. Whenever I go to Israel, I try to visit Palestinian areas. I've done documentaries with the BBC. I've met people on the extreme side. I've met ordinary people. My experience whenever I go out there is most Palestinians are decent people, has been my experience. What I will say is depending where I go will determine whether I am visibly Jewish or not. I remember the last time I was in Hebron, I went into the Palestinian part, which is 97% of the city. Yeah, 97% of the city, but into the old part of Hebron, which I'm sure you've been. I took my kippah off, and
it doesn't look like a Jewish kippah.
It's not. It's a rimless cap.
Okay.
What you call it?
Oh, okay.
Either way, it's probably why Chelsea thought you were Muslim.
Where it doesn't matter. But then I was just, I think, wearing a straw cap, a straw hat. And this Muslim, approached me, said, "Oh, where are you from?" And I was like, "I'm from England." He's like, but it's amazing. They started telling me all about London, and We had a really nice conversation, and then he said, "Oh, look, I run a YouTube channel. I just want you to say to me, Assalamu alaikum to the camera." So I was Assalamu alaikum to the followers on YouTube. We exchanged Facebooks, and then we got talking afterwards, and I dropped him a message. I said, "Look, I didn't tell you at the time, but I'm actually Jewish." He said, brother, doesn't matter. We love the Jewish people. That's good to hear. We just told the Zionists. I said, actually, I've got some bad news. I'm one of those as well. But in my experience, it's most of the Palestinians I come into contact with, I have very good relations with. I think if you're respectful to people, they're respectful back. Now, I'm not going to Gaza. I'm not going into extreme situations. I'm meeting ordinary people, or I'm part of a tour or a film crew, and it's being staged, and I'm meeting.
Ever been on Mount Gerizim?
No, but I would love to go. And if there wasn't a lockdown, this place that would be amazing, because it's not like, isn't it?
It's definitely an interesting place for you to come, because you reminded me, we have Samaritan priests who go to Shechem, and we also have a special, clothing when you're a priest. So actually, I think this happened 120 years ago. There was a rule that Samaritan priests should wear a red misnefet, which means like a hat
Like
with
a fez. Similar to the
exactly.
fez,
But there's a red one and there's a white one. So there's a kind of a ruler who said Samaritans should wear red so they can be distinguished from the Muslim priests. So until today, the Samaritans wear a red kippah.
Are you connected to these Samaritans?
I'm
a
Samaritan.
You have a Samaritan, so that's pretty connected.
He is a Samaritan. He's also apparently he's also third in line for the high priesthood.
Oh no, I wouldn't say third in line. The third generation, though. Yeah. Maybe there's 50 people who are older than me who can be. So you don't know.
Your grandfather's the Kohen Gadol, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Are most of the Samaritans Latter Day Kohanim, or?
There's 300 Cohen family, 300 from the Cohen family.
And how many? There's only a few hundred of you in total, isn't there?
There's 830.
Wow, that's
They're a dying breed.
that's a lot of priests.
That's why I tell people he's the endangered animal we keep locked in our basement.
But it's also, I think it's interesting for you to come here. You'll see we also have Palestinian and Israeli passports, right? So we do get to interact with both people a lot. And apparently you did that also, and I'm sure you have something to share with the people and let them know that face-to-face interaction is a totally different thing, whether other than hearing it from the media or from the news. That's what I think wish would happen more.
Yeah. I mean, the news does us dirty. It does us so dirty, both sides, really. If you look at it, certain organizations are better at talking about Israel-Palestine stuff, but the vast majority of it is just abhorrently negligent journalism.
I think it's really easy to blame the news, but it's not the news, it's the people. I'll give you an example. If I make a video which is pro-Islam, so an example was a couple of years ago, the end of Ramadan, we went around to Muslim neighborhoods as Zionists, handing out dates for people to break their fast on. I thought it was a beautiful video. I thought it was a really nice idea. Most of the Muslims were really touched. They were like, "Thank you so much. This is a really nice gesture. Thank you, thank you, thank you." We got a few people, "No, I'd rather not take," but most people were like, "No, that this is really, really nice." Hardly anybody watched the video. It just tanked. Why? Because it's a positive message. If I put up a video, Islamist attacks me in Speaker's Corner, hundreds of thousands of people will watch it, share it, and the news is the same. If the news print a really nice positive story about Jews and Palestinians, no one's going to click it. If they say settlers rip up an olive tree or Muslims throw stones or rocks at a cup, then people are going to click through and read it. And it's the media is just serving and fulfilling a need. It's society that's skewed and looks for this negative stories, and it's only the negative stories.
It's the intensity, the emotions that it gives them. It's sadly to say, it's entertaining in some way. So it catches eyes. So
how does it work for you then, Aboud? Living how do both communities view the Samaritans? So you're kind of a piggy in the middle. You're stuck in.
We are totally. So we used to live with the Palestinians in Nablus for hundreds of years, possibly over 1,000 years. and we started to even speak Arabic. But in 1930, some part of us moved to Holon in Tel Aviv. And now we have a group that is also connected to the Israelis a lot. And slowly the one in Har Grizim got the Israeli ID. So we have also connections with the Israelis. And suddenly, boom, we're living in both worlds, literally always traveling from both worlds. Like it's literally a 1 hour, even half an hour drive, where it's 5 minutes away from Shechem. And like we have a settlement near us, or Ariel, even a bigger city, also like 30 minutes away. So we speak Arabic, we speak Hebrew, and we have connections with both people, and both people like us actually. I guess because we've proved that we can really live peacefully with both people. Some people don't understand this much, but when I say that, I mean they might the Arabs might consider us Jewish, and the Jewish people might consider us Arabs. We do get stuck.
Didn't Hakam Ovadia Yosef rule that Samaritans are Jewish? Wasn't that one of his rulings?
Like ancestrally, yeah.
He said ancestrally. I thought he said they were Jewish.
I mean, there's a guy his name is Chaim Gagin. If you want to search his name, if you want to Google his name, Chaim Gagin. He wrote a letter for the Samaritans that they are from Bnei Israel. So Chaim Gagin, I'm sure that's the name. He wrote a letter, and that's like saying that the Samaritans are from Bnei Israel because he wanted the Palestinians to understand who we are, not to consider us that we worship idols or something like that. So they can consider us people of the book.
Yeah.
So I can relate to a lot of things you said, for sure. When you say that you meet, like when a Samaritan priest meet a rabbi, there's a lot of energy going on between the two because, it's a historical conflict between the Jews and the Samaritans. Now we're really great with everyone. Although in like more of the Orthodox Jewish side, a lot of them do not believe we are actually Bnei Israel, more like Kutim, like from Iraq.
Yeah.
So that's the theory in the rabbinic traditions somewhere in Judaism.
Yeah. So. No, those are the extremists. You don't have to worry about them.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of do have to worry about them. That's why, Joseph's had to set up Israel Advocacy Movement to try and communicate to them a little bit.
Yes.
True, good point. I think something that you mentioned earlier, Joseph, really resonates is that, if you can change one person's mind or get them to think a little bit differently or, start them on a snowball journey out of extremism, you've almost saved someone's life in that sense. It's a really beautiful thing to do. And I was just wondering what actually gave you the courage to start up your movement and how long ago was that?
So I come from a left-wing tradition. As I mentioned before I went live, I was raised in a small village, a very left-wing village in the north of England by communists. And I was raised in an anti-fascist tradition. And from a very young age, we were going on anti-apartheid marches. We were opposing the British National Party, who are the National Socialists within the UK at the time. This is back in the 80s and 90s. And I was raised very much in an anti-fascist tradition, anti-racist tradition. And when I decided I wanted to become more observant and my family forgot everything to do with Judaism, with where we came from. My father couldn't tell the difference between a Reformed Jew and a Hasidic Jew. I think hopefully today he can, maybe not. But we were very, very disconnected. And when I decided to become observant, I moved to London. And one of the things that surprised me was I bumped into the overwhelming majority of people. This wasn't the case, but I bumped into Orthodox Jews who I believe had anti-Arab, anti-Islam, anti-Muslim prejudices. And so I started to work to promote the commonalities. But I ran a website, judaismislam.com, which promotes the commonalities between the two faiths, showing how similar the two faiths are. They would go on Hajj to Mecca, circle the Kaaba. We'd go on Hajj to Jerusalem and circle the Beit HaMikdash. And so I started promoting the commonalities, and that put me into contact with the Muslim community. and then quickly came into anti-Semitism within the Muslim community, and realized you have this real problem of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. What happened was the Gaza war broke out in 2014, and I really started noticing the anti-Semitism, and so I launched an organization which is very successful now, and I've had nothing to do with its success, but I launched an organization called the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism to campaign against anti-Semitism and to inspire others to get out and do something. But when the Gaza war died down, during the conflict, we were finding anti-Semites everywhere, all over social media. Used to the gas, Hitler was right, just every day, constantly. And then the war stopped, and the anti-Semitism just disappeared, literally overnight. All these people that harbored these horrific views just stopped tweeting about it, stopped posting about it. But what persisted was what I would call the acceptable form of anti-Semitism, which is anti-Zionism. And I know you can be critical of the state of Israel without being an anti-Semite, but in my experience, the overwhelming majority of anti-Zionism, you trace it back to its origin, it is anti-Semitic, even if those that are pushing those narratives and those beliefs aren't they themselves, if they don't have any prejudice against the Jewish people. But it was the mainstream, the acceptable, the completely acceptable form of anti-Semitism within British society. And so I decided to launch the Israel Advocacy Movement on the back of that, to actually deal with the elephant in the room that nobody's talking about. No one's talking about Israel. Most Brits, whether they're on the left or the right, are opposed to anti-Semitism. Even someone like Jeremy Corbyn, who's completely blind to his own anti-Semitism, if there were a bunch of neo-Nazis putting the boot into a Hasidic Jew, he would be opposed to that. He's just blind to the other forms of anti-Semitism, which I believe he personally indulges in. But anti-Semitism is fortunately, by most people, frowned upon. But anti-Zionism is completely acceptable. And that's what inspired me to really start talking about Israel. And then speaking about Israel really got me to focus on when it came to anti-Semitism, when it came to anti-Zionism, who do you really need to speak to? And it's not the average person. For me, it's those on the periphery, those that can actually do harm. So yeah, I guess that's how I got into it.
So I'm really glad that you brought all the anti-Semitism stuff up, because I was actually about to ask you about that, and then you answered it. But it leads me on to another question, which is all of this. There's a blurred line between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. People who don't want to accept they're often the same thing. So how do you think that connects to the actual situation here in the Middle East and the peace process? Do you think that people oppose us because they're anti-Semitic, or because they're genuinely ignorant of the facts? And if they were educated on it, do you think that they would be more willing to come to the table?
I think that for each community, it's different. So take one at a time. If you take left-wing anti-Zionism, left-wing anti-Zionism, in my experience, is innately racist. It sees Jews as white, rich Europeans stealing land of poor, darker-skinned people that were living there first. And it's that simple. It's when we were weak, when Jews were weak and oppressed in Europe, they were our champions. They stood by us. They loved us. The minute we shook off our tyrants, we shook off our oppressors, the minute we gained enough strength to repel our enemies and defend ourselves and not depend on others to come to our rescue, they saw us as powerful. And that weak, strong, dynamic moved. And as we moved into a more powerful, stronger position, they came to revile us. And so it's tied to power, and it's tied to skin color. And they mistakenly believe that Israelis are white Europeans. The majority of Israelis do not descend from Ashkenazi Jews from Europe, as everyone on this chat will know. And so within left-wing anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism, I think it's coming from a place of anti-Semitism and racism, even though they're oblivious to it in most cases. And you also, this is not something that's happened overnight. if you look at the associations of left-wing organizations as they've charted through history, whether it's groups like Baader Meinhof in Germany, you have this alliance of the far left extremists, like far left terror groups and the likes, who are training with either Baathists, Islamists, it doesn't matter, but Libya, Lebanon, but going to training camps with this. And so you have this alliance between far left radicals and Islamist revolutionaries. So it's a combination of things which leads to left-wing anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism. Far-right anti-Semitism, I think, is much simpler. Far-right anti-Zionism is just anti-Semitic. They don't like Israel because it's a Jewish state. Although you will now have the weird, the weirdest thing that's occurred of recent years is the far-right white supremacists, Zionists, who support the idea of an ethno-state, and they support the idea of national state, the Jews being in their own ethno-state away from the white ethno-state, so that's a good thing. So Richard Spencer. But on the whole, even his support of Zionism is anti-Semitic. He doesn't like Jews. He doesn't want Jews in his white ethno-state, and that's why he supports Israel. I think Islamic anti-Semitism is more complicated, and I use the word Islamic because I think obviously when you go to the Islamist camp, it is just full on anti-Semitism. They will bring hadith. They will bring. I think any religious book can be interpreted for the good or for the better. So the good or the bad. Every Muslim I know that devotes their life to giving sadaqah and doing good and looking after the widow and the orphan does so based out of their interpretation of Islam. And ISIS, who go out and behead people and burn people and capture sex slaves and just do the most horrific things, do so from their interpretation of Islam. When a Jewish supremacist goes into a mosque in Tehran and guns down people, whether he's interpreting the religion or I can't get into his mind, but you have people who will believe they're doing good and they're doing bad, and it's from their interpretation of the faith. So I think with Islam, I think you can read the Quran and you can read that a Jew that does righteous deeds and believes in Yom al-Din can go to Jannah. So a Jew who does righteous deeds, believes in the Day of Judgment, can go to heaven. It says
I believe also who kind of believes in one God. That's what a religion teacher told me.
And most Muslims I speak to will go to great lengths to explain to me Muhammad had Jewish wives, Muslim men can marry Jewish women and Christian women because they're children of the book, they're monotheists, they're la ilaha illallah.
It is believed that he also gave the Samaritans actually a special letter that they get protected also as people of the book. It's a famous letter.
And was that in the Constitution of Medina, or was it a separate letter?
It was a separate letter.
Separate letter. Wow, I didn't know that. It's really interesting. Really interesting.
Very interesting.
And so I think with Islamic anti-Semitism, I think you can read hadith that seem anti-Semitic, talking about 70,000 Jews in the end days, there being a battle, the Jews will stand behind the Dajjal, the Antichrist, and you'll speak to one imam and he'll tell you it's talking about a specific Jew. Similarly, you can read about the Jews being turned into apes and pigs because they didn't keep Shabbat. And you can speak to an imam and he'll tell you it's a very specific group of people. It's not talking about all Jews. Obviously, we are not descended from apes and pigs. Otherwise, we would have different facial characteristics. And so, but you'll speak to others who genuinely believe we're the descendants of apes and pigs. And so I think with Islamic anti-Semitism, most, in my experience, the overwhelming majority, I'm speaking British Muslims now, Israel, the Middle East, is a very different situation. I'm dealing with westernized Muslims by and large. Most of them will go to great lengths to show you how they're not anti-Semitic and how Islam offers great protections to the Jewish people. But in the next breath, they will curse the state of Israel. And so there is huge opposition to the existence of a Jewish state there. And when you really scratch at why that is, it's because it's Jewish and it's Masjid al-Aqsa, and you can't square that circle.
They do have some do kind of draw a line. Like Palestinians, for example, they try to draw a line between Zionism and Judaism. if you know what
Yeah.
I mean. I'm not
I
sure
mean,
if
it's hard.
everyone kind of connects them together.
Yeah.
It's hard
Although
to do that, I think.
Yeah.
No, because
Yeah,
of
makes sense that
what
it's hard to-
Zionism really should mean, that it's
Right.
our
Yeah.
right to self-determination. It's hard to draw a line between the two. Look, of course,
Yeah.
some people don't know the facts, and even if they do, they have the right to still think that maybe because we haven't been here or hadn't been here for so long, like, you know, as a majority, and the Palestinians had moved in, fine. Like, people, I respect that opinion, but a lot of the time, I think people just jump on bandwagons and they don't really know the Middle East at all.
Yeah.
They would tell you like we are not against Zionism. We're not against the Jewish religion or Jews. We are against Zionism. I hear that a lot by Palestinians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
I mean,
think
that was the same thing I heard when I went to Nablus. Like,
It's more
it's like-
understandable coming from Palestinians, though.
yeah. I mean, Palestinians can get a pass from me when they say ignorant shit. Look, I get it. I live next to you guys. I know what's going down. Y'all, like, I know what you really mean when you say that. Doesn't mean that I'm not worried to hell about the ramifications of you saying that to a global audience. But for the most part, I give Palestinians a pass.
I think it's also easy to say as well. I think if you look at, if I were to walk around certain neighborhoods in the West Bank, dressed as I would dress going to shul, I wouldn't be asked if I'm a Zionist or if I'm an ordinary Jew. I would likely be attacked. It wouldn't be safe for me to walk around. If I was to walk around looking like a European, I'd be fine. And so I think it is a blurred line. I think in my experience, most Palestinians that I've spoken to on an individual level have said what you're saying, Aboud, have said, and it's most Muslims in the UK I speak to say the same thing, but they will harbor more what we would consider anti-Semitic views than an ordinary, say, a person on the far right in the UK. And a real great example of that is in the UK, it's not talking with Palestinians now, it's talking British Muslims. Jewish Policy Research do lots of surveys on the British population, and British Muslims harbored more, I can't remember the percentages unfortunately, more anti-Semitic views, were more likely to deny the Holocaust or question the Holocaust than people who self-reported as being very right-wing. And if you're very right-wing, you've got cause to deny the Holocaust because it doesn't do your cause very good. So maybe it's healthy to question. But the fact that more British Muslims questioned shows that there is an issue of anti-Semitism within the Muslim community. However, whenever you speak to British Muslims, they will go to great lengths to explain, and genuinely, I sincerely believe the people I speak to are being sincere when they say this, that they're not anti-Semitic and they do like Jewish people. But unfortunately, because of the last 70 to 100 years of conflict, anti-Semitism has crept into not just British Muslim, but Muslim society, in the same way that Islamophobia or anti-Muslim bigotry has crept into the Jewish community. It's very easy to understand why it's in both communities because of the conflict. But yeah, when you speak to most people, they outwardly profess they are not anti-Semitic, and I believe that they think that they're not. But in my experience, they usually harbor views that we would consider anti-Semitic. That Jews have too much influence in the media and financial institutions. The Holocaust, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't happen, maybe it wasn't the exact numbers, maybe it was just typhoid. And so, I hear what you're saying, Aboud, but I think if you dig deeper as well, there is usually an issue. So Palestinian media, etc., Palestinian textbooks and schools.
Especially, exactly. That's what I was about to say. Education. It's even in universities, there are some, like I had a course of like basically saying that the Holocaust was exaggerated or the way how it's shown to the world. And
really?
Yeah. It was a course called Palestinian Studies.
Right?
Yeah, it's a course called Palestinian Studies. It starts with showing like how Zionism uses the Torah to show that like how it was the promised land was for Abraham, and then it just evolves from there to like the Israeli agenda and all these things, which might build anti-Semitic views. I see the point. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the positive, if you were to put a positive or try to view it, the whole thing in a positive light, it's that, in my experience, the intention is, or the desire is not to hate. The desire is want to be perceived as actually being pro-Jewish, and you can build on that, and you can challenge anti-Semitic narratives that may exist, and there's something to work with. Whereas if you've got a neo-Nazi who's just saying 14 words, Jews to the gas, it's like, what can you do? There's nothing that you can work with. But with most Muslims, in my experience, that do harbor anti-Semitic voices and views, there's a lot you can actually work with, and you can actually, I can learn from them and they can learn from me, and hopefully we can build some sort of a relationship in a more positive reality.
Yeah,
for sure.
Also, for sure. And the first lesson you can teach people is this hot pro tip: if you have to explain a lot that you're not racist, anti-Semitic, homophobic, or Islamophobic, odds are you are those things. Just a hot tip. If you find yourself having to explain how not racist you are.
I'm really interested in your university there, Abood. How did that? What's it work? How does the Samaritan schooling work? Do you go to a Palestinian Muslim school? Do you go to a Samaritan school?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. If you're living on Har Grizim near Shechem, it's like a separate village, but it's near Shechem. You go usually to Palestinian schools because you don't speak very good Hebrew, so naturally you go to Palestinian schools. And if you're in Holon in Tel Aviv, the other Samaritan group, then you go to Israeli schools. I went to Palestinian schools. I went at least like eight grades, and also studied in the university there. I studied marketing. It was a pretty good experience. I even had like 2 classes where they talked about Islam. This is like it's some of them were Islamic. How do you know how can you call it, mitzvot or something like that? Commandments. Learning about Islamic commandments. I even helped some students cheat because, well, one question was like, who was the wife of Abraham? We also have that. So I helped him. I didn't know that. He was very thankful for that.
A lot of commonalities.
So it was really interesting experience, honestly, but it's also showed me, even from the first grade and second grade, I remember this really vividly, a teacher teaching us kids, being like, I don't know how old are you when you're the second grade, but she was telling the children some stories of why the Israeli IDF is bad. Okay, and whether that's true or not, you are already kind of like programming this child to have kind of build some hatred towards this thing, and it grows. And when the person grows, he might even forget where it started from the first place. So that's what I always tell people. I wish the education system kind of also taught about Judaism also. That would make people see that Judaism is not really built on hatred against other races or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
not at all. Really. Not at all. Yeah, not at all.
So like you said, it's the way you interpret the religion, or the way you, like, how you practice the commandments and how you interpret those.
Just leading on to that, it's how we interpret the commandments, and it's how we look at these things. We have 2 kind of groups of people that we haven't really spoken about, and one that's atheist or agnostic people who live in the land, and for them religion is important, and it's not something that they follow in their day-to-day lives. And the second thing is the following of commandments and the interpretation of commandments can be viewed from 1,000,001 different angles. How can we as citizens bring the public dialogue more to the middle ground and maybe take the power away from such extremist groups like Hamas, Islamic Jihad, or some of the extreme right Israeli groups that are out there, that
the Kahanists,
the people that cause more damage than good. How can we minimize that as much as possible and get people more to that middle ground, Joseph?
I think you have to look at what drives people to the extremes, and in each community it's different. One of the biggest threats to stability in the Middle East at the moment. I mean, Lebanon is a ticking time bomb. Is unemployment.
It's about to turn into Syria 2.0 over there.
If you're a young 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 20-year-old Lebanese guy, and you've got no job, you can't afford to do anything, and you've got Hezbollah who are giving you a purpose. Not only can they pay you, they can give you a reason to exist, a reason to live, and Hamas is very similar. Then you've suddenly given somebody purpose in a life that just lacks any meaning and is completely hopeless because of circumstances outside of your control. And post the Arab Spring, that's something that's repeated in Egypt and Syria. Syria's went through the most horrific war any of us have lived through, and potentially Iraq's comparable, but horrific war. One of the most savage and brutal wars on record. Egypt, I think it's something like under 25s is something like 70% unemployment, 70. Like we're facing huge, and in Israel's situation is different because it's not in the same economic downturn. But I would argue that Israel actually doesn't have as many extremists as some of the neighbors. Thank God, we don't have ISIS. We don't have Hezbollah. We do have Hamas. We do have people on the extremes, but they are much smaller in number and don't really pose a threat to the stability of the nation. And so I think really the key to solving a lot of it is giving people something to live for, giving them meaning, giving them sustenance to feed their family. And that if you don't have that, you have desperation, and you do have what's happening. So for me, it's economic. And economic partnerships, I believe, are the greatest hope for Israelis and Palestinians to actually do something, to move beyond the desperate situation they're in at the moment. I mean, the Palestinians can hopefully begin to look at Israel as being a model on what they can model their society on, in the sense that in 70 years, Israel has not just brought to life a dead language or a language that's only reserved to scripture. They've built one of the most entrepreneurial, incredible economies in the world. They've, from a nation of immigrants, a nation of refugees fleeing pogroms in Russia, the Holocaust in Europe, massacres in certain Muslim countries. They came together, these desperate people, and built one of the most incredible societies. If we could share that with our Palestinian neighbors and help them to build up their society, help them to get stability, I think more than any ideology, more than any idea, that is our greatest hope for
absolutely. Absolutely. I like that.
I'm not even sure that will happen. I think even more so. I think the economic boons that are available to us, if we come together, it won't just help them catch up with us. I think it will take all of us and take us all to the next level economically. Because you're right, obviously, we're a tiny country that's extremely prosperous per capita, and when you compare us to massive countries. And we're doing that against all of this incoming hatred and opposition, people wanting us to be quashed, BDS, all of that. And I think if we were actually more integrated economically in this region of the world, I think what we could achieve would rival any other region of the world, as the Middle East, you know?
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's so much resource, and I don't know, for me, I think most of it's cultural. I think most of the economic potential of this region in particular is cultural. The people here are just so resilient, very hardy, down-to-earth folk. And that builds, that's a strong backbone for a nation. They just need the opportunity to get out there and hustle.
Yeah. And I've said it before that tourism is probably, I'm a huge believer that tourism will be a huge part of that. The industry that benefits the most, because it's such a significant region of the world to so many different peoples and religions and groups. And people can't really go to many of the places that are holy and sacred to them because the region's unstable.
I mean, Smartphones is a great example. I'm somebody that would literally love to watch Pesach. The Samaritan Passover is like something, and it often falls on the Jewish festival. And so we can't go because we can't travel by car. We can't get there. We've got our own things to do. But this year, it actually doesn't. The first opportunity I have to actually experience it, which I really wanted to. I'm locked out of the country because of coronavirus. But I do agree. I think tourism is tourism is something that benefits both communities. If you're a Christian, there are sites that are under the Palestinian Authority that are just as important.
I take a lot of people to Jacob's Well. Jacob's Well is in Shechem, and I take a lot of Christians there. And you're right, there's in both people. I'm a tour guide, but I can take people to both areas. You know what I mean? I wish everyone could do that. It makes people connect more.
Yeah. Aboud's community is one of the only is the only community that can, chop and change from Palestinian area to Israeli area, no problem. So you've literally got the whole of the Holy Land uncovered for yourself there, Aboud.
It's true. It's easy. Yeah, it's actually a really nice thing to have, honestly, because you don't worry about entering a place accidentally and say, "Hey, I'm not allowed," because you have both IDs in your pocket, including Jordanian if you accidentally went to Jordan. So,
that's true.
But yeah, it is.
Wait, so that begs another question, Aboud. When are you going to take me to Jordan?
Oh, it depends on where. I mean, I think Israelis are allowed to go, no problem at all.
Yeah. We need a visa, but yeah, we can go. But you also remember I'm American, and that's the one I travel on. So many more countries, so much easier.
I actually made the Jordanian. I mean, I didn't I made it to go to Dubai 4 years ago, but now I think it is there's no problem. So
we can go to Dubai.
Yeah.
I just realized we can do that now.
Just now, Jared? Where have you been for the last few months, mate?
dude, I've been drowning it out. All right,
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
You got to a certain point in the lockdown where you're just sitting there listening to the news and you're just drooling, eyes rolling back into your head, just okay, I get the gist of. Just kind of just sitting there existing as this blob monster creature that I am.
I get you. I got one more question for you there, Joseph. You kind of mentioned it earlier on. We're kind of having a bit of a similar issue to you. It seems that YouTube algorithms and social media algorithms cause problems for people that are trying to speak about, real topics and issues that are really going on out in the world, but are very happy to take controversial, if you like, and they're more than happy to take advertising money for perfumes and shoes, etc., but they cause us difficulties. What are the troubles that you've had, and what have we got in store for us really going on, and how can we combat it?
So I think the key thing is just the live streams are much easier to get monetized. To basically, YouTube cares about monetization. If they can sell adverts, they'll boost your content. So if it's a longer form, like a live stream conversation, they can advertise on it. So that's fine. Where you'll run into trouble is when you're doing what I do, when you're dealing with Nazis, anti-Semites, when you're using language which will trigger the algorithm and it'll censor you. The other thing you'll encounter is as you grow larger, if people who are anti your message, and I have a lot of people that are anti my message, from the BDS crowd to the Islamists, they will mass report your content. And I've never had a video. I've had numerous community strikes, numerous videos pulled. I've never had one of them which I haven't been able to get reinstated. But the damage is already done. You already lost authority. There's question marks on the channel because you're just constantly getting flagged. The best thing you can do is don't create enemies. Create really positive videos that everybody loves. Don't use buzzwords and titles like Nazis, anti-Semites, racism, just really obvious stuff, and you should be fine. It's only when you start coming up against more nasty people that you're going to encounter issue. But I do think that in general, big tech doesn't like Israel-Palestine conversations because advertisers don't like Israel-Palestine conversations because it's incredibly contentious. So maybe if you just changed your channel to like a cookery guide or something, you'd be fine.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Israel-Palestine cookery book.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that would take off way faster than this bullcrap we're doing right now. This is going nowhere. We really should just make this a cooking show.
Yeah. Do you like tahini, Joseph?
Pardon?
Tahini. Do you
There it fucking is.
Just
There. It's a boot. We're almost out of time, so you better plug this shit quick.
yeah,
right. Just if you like tahini, don't make sure to use tahini har bracha. It's pretty delicious. I'm not saying it because it's for my family, but it's pretty delicious.
Yeah.
Again, har bracha. Thank you.
Every episode.
It really is good. It really is.
Yeah. I'm not denying that it's good.
So it's it's a very, very strategic move that the Samaritans have taken.
Yeah.
While the Palestinians and the Israelis argue over who makes the best hummus, you guys come along and say, we make best tahini.
By the way, buy it for my family. And with that, we're unfortunately out of time, fellas. So there's one thing I got.
Joseph.
Yeah.
Don't forget to like everyone, subscribe, share our video.
Yeah, like, subscribe, leave comments.
Go to Joseph's movement, Israel Advocacy Movement. Like and
go check out
Israel_advocacy.
Yeah, Israel_advocacy movement, and don't you forget. Why am I pointing at the microphone? Don't you forget, viewer, Tim on the couch. I see you.
Yeah.
Don't forget.
What you can Israel Advocacy, and also check out the Patreon that we've got.
In the description.
We're doing the good stuff, people. So get behind us.
Get us, like, if you want, donate so we can finally get some Ethernet cables, so that way Kane and Amir's internet connections will finally not look like dog shit. But with that, guys, unfortunately, the episode is over.